Thomas, former Speaker of the House here in Missouri. She now wants to be your next new governor. Catherine Hanaway, thanks for joining us here on the Big 550 KTRS.
Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
And what a way to start.
Yes.
Keeping a promise.
Keeping a promise. Boy, that's so weird for a politician these days. The Governor Nixon gave his State of the State address. Here's a nice softball for you. What did you think of his State of the State address?
It was precisely the kind of speech that only somebody who would start by bragging that he'd been in office for 32 consecutive years could give. He ignored all the major problems, tried to sound like a fiscal conservative, but then proposed almost $800 million in new spending, and his budget has 43 different ways that he's asking for new spending.
So you're saying that he's tone deaf, among other things.
He's tone deaf. I think he's unwilling to confront the most serious problems. He didn't mention Ferguson. He didn't mention the protests at the University of Missouri. He didn't address the fact that we lagged, in the last decade, we've lagged behind the rest of the country in economic development. He talked about the fact that we're spending more than we ever have on education, but he didn't talk about the fact that our average starting salary for teachers is 47th in the country. Our average salary for teachers is 41st. If we're spending more money than we ever have on education, why isn't it getting to the people who are actually in the classroom educating our kids?
Catherine Hanaway wants to be your next new governor. There's only so much money, and by law, you have to have a balanced budget. How would you reconfigure the budget to give money where it's needed and more money in the classroom?
So I would focus on the things that I think will move our state forward instead of trying to throw more money at the failed solutions of the past. So we're the worst state in the country at moving people from welfare to work. We've got to start to do that. We've got to move people off entitlements and back into the productive workplace. That will free up money to invest in transportation and roads and in education and higher education. Our path forward in this state is by getting the great people of this state back to work and participating in the economy.
A couple of other issues, Catherine Hanaway. One is the doctor shopping bill here in Missouri. Missouri is the only state that doesn't have some type of mechanism to track prescription drugs. We're in the middle of an epidemic. Would you be in favor of some type of law that would keep some type of list of who is getting prescription drugs?
So as a former prosecutor who prosecuted, I think, as many meth cases as any other federal prosecutor in the country, I know how persistent this problem is. At the time that I was prosecutor, it was people pill shopping for Sudafed and those kinds of things. Now it's other more serious prescription drugs. We do have to have a way to see who is buying what and make sure they're not abusing the system, but we can't make that trade-off and force people to give up their personal medical records and privacy. So it's a complicated formula, but it's one we've got to solve. Other states have tried to solve it. I think in some instances they've taken an approach that does invade on personal privacy too much. But look, we've got people dying from heroin addiction. Too many kids are addicted to prescription drugs. We don't have a mechanism in the state right now to figure out who's getting what and whether they're going from pharmacy to pharmacy and doctor to doctor, getting multiple prescriptions and getting them filled over and over again.
We are in the middle of an epidemic. Everybody says so. You don't just see, lifelong drug addicts dying in an alley over heroin. You're seeing young children coming from affluent communities, from rural communities, from inner city communities, from suburbs. It's not just the doctor shopping law. How would you go about attacking this epidemic in the state?
But we do have to have a mechanism by which we track who's getting prescriptions. And the other thing that we have to do is focus on addiction and treatment. Look, we pay for addicts. families pay for it, communities pay for it, the state pays for it through incarceration. I do think that we need to reprioritize how we're spending that money and spend some of that money on prevention and treatment programs and mental health programs rather than spending it all on incarceration. I think if we do that, we will save lives, we'll save families, we'll save communities.
Catherine Hanaway, the Stadium Task Force spent $16 million to keep the Rams here in St. Louis. They didn't keep the Rams, and they spent $16 million. What are your thoughts as you watch the governor and his moves to try and keep the Rams here in the region?
What a joke is my response to it. There was never a realistic possibility that we were going to keep the Rams. The proposal we put on the table, the NFL basically told us, was not really even compliant with their rules. And now I know the NFL did a little bit of a bait and switch. These are the rules. These aren't the rules. Instead of sort of chasing after a team that was already out the door, we ought to be fixing the problems that drove them out the door. It's the fact that our state, relative to other states, is shrinking in population. We're losing corporate headquarters. We're not attracting people here. The kind of press we're getting around the world is related to instances in like the terrible circumstances in Ferguson, the lawlessness at the University of Missouri. Let's fix the root problems. Let's invest in our toughest problems rather than chasing a team that was out the door.
Do you think Missouri, the state, the city, some entity should sue the NFL for the $16 million to at least get that money back?
I think it's worth a shot, but, I have to kind of see what our legal theory would be with respect to that. And I haven't given it, and I am a lawyer, I haven't given it a ton of thought, quite honestly, McGraw.
Well, you should talk to me because I say yes. So there.
Yeah, he's been saying
my
it.
gut reaction is yes. I agree with that, but now we get into the nitty gritty.
Right. Well, nitty gritty. Leave that for somebody else. You just. Catherine Hanaway, how's the campaign going?
It's going great. The new year's off to a great start. Since we started traveling in this campaign, we've been to over 270 events. We have volunteers in every Missouri county, and the one thing that we hear over and over and over again is Missourians want some conservative leadership in the governor's mansion, and they are ready for the right kind of change this time around.
Have you thrown your political weight behind a presidential candidate yet?
I have not. I am watching with the same interest as everybody else to see what's going to happen in Iowa and New Hampshire and how the fields will change. I have to say, as a keen political observer, this has been one of the most interesting presidential, well, not one of, it has been the most interesting presidential campaign I have seen to date, and I'm not sure that we have any idea who the Democrat nominee is going to be either.
All right, there you go. Catherine Hanaway running for governor. Catherine Hanaway, thanks for joining us. Have a good day. Be safe on the campaign trail.
Thanks very much, McGraw. You have a good day, too.